If you are wanting to plan a vacation that will be for the ages, a vacation you will not forget, one of those once in a lifetime memorable trips, I'm going to encourage you to strongly consider going on a European river cruise. My name is Shauna Brooks, and I am so excited to tell you about the cruise we just returned from. My husband and I just went on our very first European river cruise, and we had heard about them for a while from another friend who had gone on several over the years. It was always a bucket list item, and the universe just kind of everything lined up for us to be able to go on this trip just a couple of weeks ago, and it was so outstanding. I'm already looking at when we can go again. So the trip we went on was a trip of the Rhine and the Moselle River. Now, I'm not great with geography. Maybe you are better than I am, but the Rhine River is in Europe, and it kind of runs between France and Germany. It runs north and south. And then we also went on the Moselle River, which runs east and west. And the way they described it to us is that the Rhine River, the Rhine River is more like an interstate. There's more traffic, and you will see other boats all the time. The Moselle is more like a windy country road. You will see some other boats, but it's going to be slower and not as much traffic. Now, if you have been on other cruises, like we have done Carnival twice and we've done Royal Caribbean, this is nothing at all like either one of those. First of all, the ship itself is much, much smaller in size. This ship that we were on had 122 passengers. That's it. Not 6,000, 7,000. And so the boat itself is much, much smaller. Now, we ended up choosing a room with a balcony, and I would probably do that again. However, we didn't really use the balcony all that much, but the reason why I would choose a room with a balcony again is just because of the location of where those rooms are on the boat. The rooms with the balcony are on a level where you've got the dining commons at one end and basically the entrance and exit on the other end, with maybe just about 5 or 6 stairs, and that's it. And you've got the lounge area on the opposite end as well. But if you're in one of those balcony rooms, you have really easy access to anything you would need. So the boat size itself is much smaller. That means, you don't have a lot for evening entertainment. There are no pools to go to. But we were fine with that because there was so much during the day for us to fill our time with. It was just a completely different experience. What we found is that a smaller ship with fewer passengers, it meant that it allowed us to get to know the passengers a little bit better than we would on a normal cruise ship with thousands of people on there. And going along those lines, we met some really, really wonderful people. Now, I would say the average age of the passengers on this ship were probably retirement age or even a little bit older. In fact, there was one lady on our cruise, I believe she was 86. Her name was Hilga. She was adorable. And this was her 50th trip with Grand Circle. And I think that speaks volumes about them. And they just have tons of returning customers, returning clients. And I think that's super, super cool. And again, it says a lot about their customer service. Now, the cruise line that we went with, they are called Grand Circle Travel. And that company has been around, I believe, since the late 1950s. And they have got customer service down to a science. It was funny. My husband and I both have our own small business in real estate, and we came back from that trip wanting to incorporate some of the customer service items that we learned while we were on this trip. One of the things that really stood out to me with regard to their customer service was that they always told us what was coming next. And then when it did happen, they reminded us, okay, here we are. As we told you yesterday, this is what we're going to do now. Every evening before dinner, we had a port talk. The port talk was at 6:45. We met in the lounge, and it was about 15 minutes long, and they told us what to expect tomorrow. And I just love that. It kind of, helped alleviate any anxiety that anybody might have. It reminded us of what was coming next. And I just really, really loved that. Going along with the customer service, we found out ahead of time before we even left for the trip that one of the locks I believe it was the Rhine River. I can't remember. It was one of the locks on one of the rivers had been broken. And so that meant we were not going to be able to stop in Luxembourg as we had previously planned. But let me tell you, this crew and this staff went out of their way to reshuffle everything to make sure that they could still deliver a high quality trip and a high quality experience for us, even though we were going to have to miss one of those ports. And believe it or not, they were able to make up for it. And the people that wanted to go to Luxembourg still got to do that. So that was just an example of how this crew and this staff just really, really went above and beyond. I think it also speaks highly for this particular cruise line that a lot of their staff members have been with them for many, many years. That means they are happy employees as well. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. As far as the rooms are concerned, I mean, it's your typical cruise ship, not a huge room. And I would say this cruise ship in particular is pretty old. It was an older ship, and yet it was super cleaned and very well maintained. So that did not bother me at all. We've been on other cruises where you have a normal, maybe king or queen size bed. I can't remember. In this room, we had two twin beds. So that might take a little bit getting used to for some people. It didn't bother us. The mattresses were a little bit hard, but of course you've got your ideal mattress at home. But it did not bother us, again, just because the room was so clean and so well taken care of. So that was not a problem for us. The food was great. The portions were exceptional. And there were several people on our boat that had also toured with other river cruises. They said the food was not nearly as good on those other ships and that their portions were not as generous. I thought it was super cool as well that the chef would actually take another crew member with him and get off of the boat every day when we landed at a new port, and they would go and get fresh ingredients from the city that we were at so that they could prepare meals for us that were local to that area. We had a captain's meal, a captain's dinner at the beginning of our trip, and then we had another one at the end of our trip, and they were amazing. I think we had a cold appetizer, a warm appetizer, a soup, a main entree, a dessert. It was just outstanding. And I'm telling you, there was more silverware on this trip than I have ever seen in my life. I mean, I always know about the salad fork. You start on the outside and then the entree fork. I mean, there were times that there were 3 forks on one side and 3 knives on the other. I felt sorry for the staff that had to wash all the silverware every day. It was a ton of silverware. Rule of thumb, just start from the outside and go in. Still holds true. What else? In the mornings, I never made it to breakfast. That's normal for me. I like to just have my coffee in the room. My husband always goes down for breakfast. I believe he had an omelet made every morning, and then he brought back some meat, cheese, muffins for me. The breakfast was outstanding. The lunch, every day there was just an awesome fresh salad bar every day. And one of the chefs would, have a make your own grill item for lunch. And the lunches were almost as fancy as the dinners. I mean, they would also be served with a soup and an entree in addition to the salad bar. But that salad bar was on point, delicious every day. In the evenings, we had dinner every night at 7 o'clock. Now, the cool thing about this ship is that every seat was full for dinner, in the dining room, but we did not have assigned seating. So oftentimes you might be eating a meal with new people. And that was pretty cool too. There were lots of people from all across the country on this trip, and we had people from other countries as well. There was a couple from Portugal. They were currently living in Portugal, but the husband was from Romania, the wife was from China. We had another lady from England. It was just a lot of variety and just really, really neat to be able to sit down and talk with these people in a casual atmosphere. Now, on this trip with Grand Circle Travel, one of the things that I think gave them great value, in my opinion, was that they had a house beer, house wine, all the coffee you wanted all day long, and unlimited soda. And by the way, I've heard of other cruise ships where maybe they offer a complimentary beer or wine with the meals. These were offered all day long. The coffee station was open all day. You could go to the bar anytime. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't say all day. I wasn't up in the middle of the night. I go to bed pretty early. But in the middle of the day, if you wanted to go up to the bar, get a beer, get a soda, whatever, that was all included. And they were not skimpy with what they gave you. When they came around at mealtime, you had to like cover up your glass and say no more. All of the wines they gave you were local to whatever area we were at that day. And I thought that was really neat as well. Going back to pricing and value, we went on another cruise with Royal Caribbean, and it was a couple of years ago, but if I remember correctly, I believe we were on the ship for 6 nights. And it was normal that, like most cruise lines, if one person in the room you're sharing a room with gets the drink package, then you both have to. So we ended up getting the drink package for 6 nights on that Royal Caribbean trip, and I believe the price was about $1,200. That that hurt my tummy. That was a lot. That was a lot of drinking we had to do to get our money's worth. But on this cruise, there was no additional drink package. Again, you got your house beer, house wine, coffee included, soda included, and then if you wanted additional cocktails, they would make anything you wanted. So we were on the boat 14 days, and when we got our final bill for the additional cocktails we had had, we also had 4 massages on this trip. My husband and I both had an hour massage each, so 2 and 2. And then we had our laundry done twice while we were on the boat for 14 days. And all the cocktails, the laundry, and the 4 massages, and a couple of gift items I bought on the boat, our bill came to $535. That's a huge comparison to the $1,200 with Royal Caribbean for drinks alone for 6 evenings. So there was a ton of value there as well. Going along with pricing, I know somebody that is going to be taking this same Rhine River, Moselle River cruise next year. They are going with Viking, and they're only going to be gone 8 days. We were gone 16 days, and their trip next year is going to cost $2,000 more than ours did. And I'm not positive if their price included the international airfare or not. I know that ours did. Right at the beginning of the trip, when we first called to make reservations, we were very impressed with the person that took our phone call, helped us book the trip. They really went out of their way to find the best flights with the most convenient times. And in fact, when we called and made our reservation on Friday of Memorial Weekend. They called us back on Saturday to tell us they had found an even better flight for us that was a little bit less expensive. So that was just our first taste of how they were going to be above and beyond on this trip. I think another cool thing, going back to customer service, was this staff, like they really went out of their way to remember you individually, not only remember your name, but they would, welcome you to the table, and they would say, oh, unsweet iced tea with sweet and low, or they would remember what drink or whatever you wanted. They just, again, their customer service was outstanding. So a typical day on the boat looked like this. There was breakfast from about 7 to 9 a.m. There was also an early breakfast, maybe at 6 or 6:30. I never saw that one. But breakfast was typically from about 7 to 9 a.m. And then at 9 a.m. is when we would usually get off of the ship and then go in for our tour. Now, some of the days they had buses waiting for us off of the ship, and we would divide up. And sometimes we had to drive like maybe 30 or 40 minutes before we got to our destination and then had our tour. But it seemed like towards the end of the trip, most of our ports, we got off the boat and we were right there ready for our tour. The tour itself usually was about 90 minutes, and it was, before things got crazy busy in the places we were going to and before it got super hot in the day. So that was really nice. A lot of people have asked about the walking. Um, we did do a fair amount of walking, but it wasn't overboard ever. Now, I will say there were all the roads were cobblestone in Europe, and so you want to wear shoes that give you good ankle support. And we don't want you twisting an ankle or anything like that. But most of the time, I just packed two pairs of shoes. I had my Birkenstocks and I had my tennis shoes, and that worked great. Now we would walk for a little bit, and then our tour guide would stop and explain something for a few minutes, and then we would walk just a little bit more and stop again. So um, they rated our activity level on this trip on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the easiest, 5 being the most extreme. This trip was rated a level 1, and I would definitely agree with that. There were a couple of excursions we went on to older castles that, and they warned you ahead of time, hey, this castle is going to have lots of inclines, lots of steps, whatever. If you don't think you can handle that, then maybe, stay back from that. So they really gave you good warning on that. But overall, the walking was definitely, you were able to handle that. Now, here's a mistake I made. So I just did a random Google search. What is the average temperature in Europe during August or something like that? Well, it told me that the average temperatures were between 50 and 70 degrees. So that's how I packed. Big mistake. What I should have done and what I would recommend you do is instead open up your your weather app on your phone and plug in the specific cities you're going to be going to, and look ahead for what the weather's going to be next week on your trip. One of the days, in fact, I brought clothes for temperatures 50 to 70 degrees. One of the days was 96 degrees. So, needless to say, I got to do a little shopping in one of the cities when we were in Germany. I think the city we were in was Shapir, and it was wonderful. The ladies were super helpful, and it was so much fun. I got to do shopping after our tour. My husband went to a beer garden. He got to sit down, have some local beers, and I got to do some shopping, and it was just so wonderful. So I would recommend that you check the weather more specific to the exact places you're going to be, and check that weather right before you go on your trip so you know accurately what you're getting yourself into. Another thing I would recommend, I did this accidentally, but on my phone settings, I have an iPhone, and I had my location on. And what that meant was for every picture and every video I took on the trip, when I go back now and I look through those pictures and those videos, it tells me what city we were in. And that was a really, really fun surprise. That was accidental. I didn't do that on purpose, but I'm really thankful now because, everything kind of runs together and it's easy to get confused. Now, again, on our trip with Grand Circle Travel, we had about 120 people on our ship, and they divided us into three different groups. And each group naturally had about 40 people, and each group had their own individual tour guide. Our tour guide, I think we got the best one. He was from Germany. He had been with Grand Circle Travel. He has been with them over 17 years. And he was a history major in college. He had a um, smooth voice that was easy to listen to, very knowledgeable. He had a dry sense of humor. He could be a little sarcastic every once in a while. We loved him. His name was Johannes Bauer, I think was his last name. Tall German guy with a long braid. Just a super, super neat guy. The other two tour guides, one was from Corsica, France, and the other one was from Antwerp, Belgium. When I listened to the other two gentlemen talk at different times, for me they were a little harder to understand. They spoke quickly, their words were choppy, but we loved our German tour guide, Johannes. As far as entertainment on the ship, there's not a ton. They would usually have some sort of entertainment every evening after dinner. And by entertainment, that means like one evening, I think there was a choral group that came and performed for us. Another evening, there was a female quartet that performed. There was always a guy in the lounge playing keyboards, singing lightly. Or sometimes in the evening, they would have a talk. They might have a political talk or talk about the local area that we would be visiting. And all of that was kind of neat. Maybe one night, perhaps, my husband and I and the little group we kind of coupled up with ended up doing karaoke in the lounge. It was really just the six of us doing karaoke, but super duper fun. Let's see. What else? Anything else? I just highly, highly, highly recommend it. I have to tell you that earlier this year, we went on what I thought was going to be my dream vacation. We went to an all inclusive in Puerto Vallarta. It was a place I had gone to back in 2001. And in my mind, I had always remembered that as being the most spectacular vacation ever. And so I talked my husband into letting us go back to the very same resort. It was beautiful. It was outstanding. But on that trip, I will tell you, we were gone about 10 days. And by about day 7 or 8, maybe even 6 or 7, we were ready to come home. It was just my husband and I. There's only so much eating and drinking you can do. On this trip, we were on that boat 14 days and we weren't ready to come home. There was more we wanted to see. Now, for us personally, we we in particular loved the cities that were along the Moselle. That was wine country. That was older cities that you'd look out of the boat and you'd see the water. Your ship was on the water right there, and you'd see all these little towns and villages, little buildings, and then lo and behold, there'd be a castle up there. And those cities were our favorite, the older cities. We visited Bonn, Germany, Bonn. That was a very modern city. We didn't care for that personally. Um, it just wasn't our thing. We just loved the older ones with character. And I have to tell you, and leave a comment if you've been there too, but along the Moselle, it was just shocking for us that we saw these really, really steep hills with farmland, a lot of wineries, a lot of vineyards, but also other farmland. I mean, these farmers are not using any equipment to get to the fields. It was all done by hand, and that was just amazing. Another thing that was interesting and shocking to us is that camping seems to be like a favorite pastime in Germany. So we'd be going along the river and you would see tons of tents, campers set up, trailers, and again, in the background, there would be a castle. So it was kind of crazy to see some similar looking stuff, like all the camping stuff, but then to have the castle in the background was quite a surprise as well. I think that covers just about everything, but if you have done a European river cruise, I would love to hear about it. If you're thinking about a European river cruise, I would highly recommend looking at Grand Circle Travel. Their web address is gct.com. Check them out. I think you're going to see a lot of value there and have a wonderful experience. We'll see you next time.